Hey VC, it's Matt again. So yeah, someone came to the door and I had to take care of that, so I had to cut this video mid video. Hope it's not mid because it's already pretty long, but see if we can wrap this up. I didn't want to go back and re-record this and try to remember all that stuff that I said the first time. So yeah, we were on the song Little Pad, which is the last song on side one of Smiley Smile. Sort of a song about wanting to have a house in Hawaii. It's a neat song, like I said, kind of Hawaiian sounding guitar in there and a little bit of sunshine, breezy pop mixed in. Sort of shifts the musical motif or sound, sort of shifts kind of seamlessly in here. Good song. I'm going to give it a 7. This one reminds me, bits and pieces of it kind of remind me of Pink Floyd after Sid left, after Pop at the Gates of Dawn, and before they sort of got into their Dark Side of the Moon and on. But those in between albums was kind of strange Pink Floyd albums like Gumma Gumma and more, obscured by clouds and Saucer Full of Secrets, when they were just doing kind of weird experimental cool things. And it has a little bit of that vibe to it, I think. So that ends up side one, takes us to side two. But before that, don't know if I really talked about the cover much. This is a 1967 album. Some glare on there. I don't know how well you can see it, but fitting album for 1967. The Summer of Love and Psychedelic Summer. They got a house up there with the lips kind of on the Smile album motif. If you remember the cover for the Smile album, sort of a paying tribute to that. So someone's living in the house there in the woods or the jungle, and got this cover. Looks cool, like a Henri Rousseau, not sure how you pronounce his last name, the post-impressionist painter from France. Looks like one of his paintings. And so you got an elephant running around there. There's a giraffe. You got a cheetah or something down here. Got a bluebird flying around, parrot up there. It's kind of cool down there at the very bottom, if you can see that, which I don't think you're going to be able to because of the, let me find the thing. There he goes. Got a little worm or snake or something crawling around down there at the bottom. And there's the back cover. Again, apologize for the glare. Looks like those botanic prints that you see in people's houses sometimes. It's kind of a neat cover. And so yeah, anyway, we'll go on to side two. Side two opens with Good Vibrations, which is, of course, the original version, the single that was released a year earlier. Good Vibrations doesn't fit on this album at all. It breaks the flow. It sticks out like a sore thumb because you have this very ramped down, lo-fi, low-key, kind of fragile, just kind of low-key album of low-key songs, and then in the middle of it you throw Good Vibrations, this very produced, very progressive for 1966 and even 1967 song, ornate Baroque piece of pop. And the song, like I said, had come out a year before, went to number one. It was their last number one of the 60s, their biggest selling 45 of the 60s. I'm giving it a 7. I appreciate the artistry in it, appreciate the complexity and the vision of it. Just never been one of my favorite Beach Boys songs. It's a great song. I'm not going to say it's not, but there's a lot of songs of theirs that I like better. But the point is, it really just doesn't fit on here. It's kind of like, if, I guess, a going backwards example, if you took A Day in the Life, great song by the Beatles, and you stuck it on the Please Please Me album, it just, great album, Please Please Me, great song, A Day in the Life, but it just doesn't, breaks the flow of the album and the mood of the album. So it really doesn't belong here, and I'm not rating it a 7 because of that, even though it doesn't belong here. But it's just never been one of my favorite songs of theirs, or I appreciate what it is, and it is a great song. It's not one of my favorites, but it's just kind of strange. And Brian Wilson didn't want this on here. The record company wanted it on here to try to hope to sell more records, I guess, and some of the other band members wanted it on here probably for the same reason. Of course, it didn't really help because this album didn't sell very well, but I can understand that from a business standpoint. But it's kind of jarring to run into that because the album has a flow, and Good Vibrations definitely isn't in line with that flow, and it just sort of breaks things up. But yeah, 7, and Carl and Mike, they sing trade off on lead on that, of course. Um, now we go to second song on side 2 is called With Me Tonight, which Carl sings. Very beautiful vocal, one of his great vocals. He's arguably maybe the best singer in the band. Of course, he sang lead on God Only Knows, which is one of their best songs and one of the best songs of all time. Uh, Very haunting, beautiful vocal, spiritual song. Almost sounds like he's singing to, I don't know, God or someone who's dead, or maybe just a girlfriend that he lost. The organ in it adds to the atmosphere and tone. It's kind of neat. At about 26 seconds in, you can hear someone say good, like an engineer or producer or something. That was kind of they were doing a take, and someone said good as they liked the way the song started off. The band thought that sounded good, and they just left the mistake in there, and it works. I'm going to give that song a 9. It's really great. Um, so now what's next is Wind Chimes, which is a Smile song. The Smile version is much more complex and produced than the one here. This is really stripped down. It's a group singing, the whole group singing on it. It's the organ really adds to the atmosphere of the song. It's a very lo-fi, low-key song. Song moves around musically quite a bit, but it works. It kind of strange at the end of the song. It just sort of doesn't really fade out. It just sort of disappears and floats off into the ether. Great song. I'm giving it a 9. The one on Smile, I think I gave a 10. Both great versions, just different. Number 4 is Getting Hungry. This was released as a single, like I said, but it was released as a solo single. Mike Love and Brian Wilson didn't do anything, which I can kind of understand. It's not commercial at all, but it's another song where the music just sort of shifts around, different styles of music, different tempos, different musical motifs, sort of a bluesy. Um, it's a strange song because some of it's kind of like they just sat down and started singing with a tape recorder. Some of it's like it's a produced song, and it goes back and forth between lo-fi and produced, I guess, but it works. Cool song is 8.5. I'm going to give that. Number after that is Wonderful, the 5th song on here. It's another Smile song that's redone. Carl sings lead on this. I don't know who sang lead on the Smile sessions. Probably Brian, maybe Carl. This is a very strange song too. It's read someone called it proto psychedelic chamber pop, and that seems kind of fitting. It's a very dream-like song. It's like Carl's whispering secrets to someone. The voice goes way down to almost a whisper, comes up to regular singing. Very swirling, dreamlike, strange song, very beautiful song. I'm going to give that a 9. 6th and final song is called Whistle In. Shortest song on the album. It's only 1 minute and 7 seconds. Carl and Mike share lead vocals on that. It's got a cool, most upbeat kind of rocking song on the album. It's got a cool piano and electric bass opening. A little snippet of a song, but it's a good little snippet. I'm going to give that one a 7. So overall, I'm going to give this album an 8. It's, like I said, when I'm doing these Beach Boys, got into doing these reviews to sort of learn more about the Beach Boys myself, because other than the hits, I didn't know a whole lot about them or their songs. So this was an album that I went into when I picked it up, and I picked it up here 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I've been playing it quite a bit to familiarize myself with it. I didn't know anything on here going in. I knew Heroes and Villains and Vegetables, and I knew, Wind Chimes and Wonderful, that were from the Smile sessions, but I knew that these songs were re-recorded and done different, so I didn't know what to expect. The rest of these songs, and there's several songs on here that had nothing to do with the Smile album that were recorded, written and recorded especially for the Smiley Smile album. So I didn't know any of those. There's nothing on here that, with the exception of Good Vibrations, which had been a hit a year earlier, and I guess Heroes and Villains to some extent, even though that's not your typical Beach Boy hit, and it didn't do that great hit chart-wise. But other than that, there's really nothing on here that could really be deemed pop-friendly or radio-friendly, or this doesn't sound like the Beach Boys albums before it. You're not going to find Surfer Girl or uh, Little Honda on here. This is something totally different, which is album didn't sell well. I can just only imagine the kids that bought this album in '67, the few that did, were probably expecting the Beach Boys of '64, '65, and I can't imagine what they made of this album. They must have been scratching their head. Um, it does. Was thinking about Ram, Paul McCartney's album Ram, which was another album that when that came out in '71 was not almost universally slammed by the critics and by a lot of the Beatles fans. Didn't like it. It's an album that's grown in stature, rightfully so, in the years since, to where it's now considered by many to be Paul McCartney's best solo album and one of the best solo Beatles albums. It usually comes in around third after Plastic Ono Band and All Things Must Pass, which where I'd put it, it'd be my third favorite and my favorite Paul McCartney album. But the reason I bring that up is that I've read several places that Ram was inspired in large part by the Beach Boys, and I never really got that because, before getting into this, I just knew the Beach Boys' '60s hits and unfortunately Kokomo, but and Ram certainly doesn't sound anything like Be True to Your School or When I Grow Up to Be a Man or Warmth of the Sun. But having listened to this album, and like I said, I've listened to, because the reviews are coming up, I've listened to the 3 or 4 that follow this album. Now I sort of get it, because if Ram is truly uh, influenced to whatever degree by the Beach Boys, it's obvious that Paul was taking his cue off of these albums and not the '63, '64, '65 Beach Boys albums. So now when I listen to Ram, I can kind of hear some Beach Boy influence from this perspective to the next 4 or 5 albums going forward. Anyway, it's like I said, it's a very strange album. It's not pop radio friendly. If you're looking for the Beach Boys' early '60s hit sound, you're not going to find it here. This is very fragile, very delicate, very weird. It's just like a Disney soundtrack album, a kids album by Disney, a kind of a cracked Disney album mixed with sort of a psychedelic Piper at the Gates of Dawn type, whimsical fairy tale, mysterious flavor to it. It's not an album that I love. This album, I like this album a lot. I'll say I really like this, and I didn't know what to expect. I don't know that this is not the best album they did. There's albums that I like better by them. This is one that I think I'll play quite a bit in the years ahead. I don't think it's one I'll play all the time. I think it's going to be one of those when you're in the mood for it. Unlike Ram, unfortunately, I don't know that this has had a critical reevaluation to much degree. The people in 1967, I think, kind of missed out by ignoring the Beach Boys and not paying any attention to this, because it's quite charming, quite wonderful little album. It's worth investigating. If, like I said, if you're looking for the '65, '64 Beach Boy sound, this isn't where to start. If you're new to the Beach Boys, it wouldn't be the place to start to look into them. It'd probably just confuse you and scare you off. I'd start with the earlier stuff and work up to this, and I think you'd find a lot to love in this album. And hopefully it gets a critical reevaluation. That great pillar of the VC himself, Bobby Zee, is quite enamored and a fan of this album, I believe. And it's definitely worth checking out. It's not the equal of a lot of the great albums of '67, of Sgt. Pepper, of Jimi Hendrix's debut, of Piper at the Gates of Dawn, or the Who Sell Out, but it's every bit as strange and interesting as those albums, and it's to a large degree as worthwhile and fulfilling as those albums. It's an odd duck of an album. It's I don't know, check it out. It's good. I'm going to give overall, what I say, I think I said an 8. And yeah, so like I said, this video's gone a long time. I know that, but I just want to make sure that I haven't left anything important out. And so yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's exactly a butt instead of a grand slam. I'd say it's quite a bit better than that. It's worth checking out. It's the oddest album they ever made. I haven't heard all their albums because I'm still going through them, but so far as what I've heard, this is the strangest album they've ever made. But it's an intriguing, nifty little fun record, and there's some cool stuff on here. Check it out, and we'll be back with the next Beach Boy album, which is going to be Wild Honey, which was also released in 1967, so they had 2 that year. But Smiley Smile gets an 8 and a thumbs up.